Hello, everyone. This is the September 2nd edition of the Kubernetes GitHub administration subproject meeting. We have a bunch of things on the agenda today. I'll start by mentioning we follow the Kubernetes and CNCF Code of Conduct. Please be excellent to each other. Nikita, you have the first thing on the agenda.
Yeah, so I just wanted to float the idea out for a rotation program among the GitHub admins and probably even the new membership coordinators for handling issues that come up in the KR repo. I think it's mostly been me and Bob handling a bunch of it, and I have been slacking off on it recently, so I think Bob's been looking at it, and it's not fair to him and it's not sustainable either. And while I'm talking about this, I realized that I should probably come up with some ideas on how this rotation program would work. But yeah, I'm curious, like, first of all, do you all think this is a good idea? And your thoughts on how we can roll this out?
By rotation program, are you talking something like, you know, the docs wrangler rotation or something like that happens over in SIG docs?
Yeah, pretty much that.
I mean, I'm in favor of it for sure. And I don't know that I particularly need a super technical solution to figure out what the rotation, how the rotation would be implemented. I would be fine if we created a shared calendar that GitHub admins had write access to, where we could just schedule ourselves to be on a, you know, weekly rotation sort of deal and swap out as needed for when life events come up. I will mea culpa. I've definitely, I think I agree with Nikita's assessment that it's probably been Nikita and Bob doing the majority of the administrivia. I have selfishly, like, I have swept through open PRs and open issues when I look at that repo, but I generally only look at it when somebody or some project I know needs help right now. So it's been best effort cleanup for me.
Yeah, and I think that's the same on my end. Like, if somebody pings or something and says, hey, this needs attention, I will hop on it as needed, but I haven't been doing that on a more regular basis. And if we had a rotation or something, I knew, like, oh, okay, this is my week, I need to go and, like, make sure I do and check it. Because the thing is, like, even if you do it, it's not like you need to even do it daily, but it's like once or twice during the course of a week that keeps it well groomed. Is just understanding, like, whose responsibility is that week. I think that'd be helpful and positive.
We increased our SLA to a week anyway, so even if it's just like once a week, you know, take a look at it.
Yeah.
So it looks like we're all +1. I'll work on, like, rolling this out and documenting this and getting this out the door maybe by next week. And just to be clear, we're looking at like a week, like a rotation program where each member rotates after a week, right?
Yep. The other thought is, like, the new membership coordinators, are they active? Do we need to cycle them out if they're inactive? It's kind of related to this. Like, do we include the new membership coordinators in this? We should probably have a conversation with the three of them.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I think they'd also be in favor of a schedule, because it is just kind of like up to whoever checks it to then take care of the stuff.
Yeah. And I know all three of them are still active in the project. It's just Are you active, like actually looking at the memberships coming in? Okay. Thanks for that, Nikita. Madhav, looks like you have the next thing on the agenda.
Yeah, hi. So what I wanted to like bring attention to once again was, so I was working on migration of kind design to kind feature on at least Kubernetes/Kubernetes, and there were a few like really interesting points that Aaron brought up with respect to label sync's behavior if it were done in the current way. So a little bit of context on what's happening right now. So the current scenario is that we remove kind design from the default section in label sync, meaning that any new repositories that are added will not by default get a kind design label, and that will have to be an opt-in for any and all repositories that are further added after this change is merged, if it's done in this way. And the second interesting point that Aaron brought up was that if we do it this way, then you would have a persistent diff between the repositories that already have kind design. So let's say cluster API or kubeadm, for example. So they already have kind design, but the source of intent, that is the label sync YAML file, wouldn't have kind design in it unless it's opted in explicitly. So is this behavior acceptable is one question that we need to ask. Second question that we need to ask is, if not, then would the way forward be to modify label sync in some way so that we can add like whitelisting capabilities of some sort, for example? That would be the second question, like as a follow-up to answer based on this. So like I just wanted to get feedback from like the community in general and what people think about this, because I know that migration of this has been in the works for quite some time now. And yeah.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. I'm just having a look at the issues myself.
Yeah,
Looks
same
like
here.
you commented on it, Aaron. Did you have any other context or thoughts you wanted to bring to us?
I mean, I just posted in chat what I feel like the TLDR is like, as proposed, we'll end up with a situation where some repos will have the kind design label specified both in GitHub and in the labels YAML file. And then every single issue that has kind design will keep the kind design label. I suspect the ideal intent is those repos that want to continue having kind design have it specified in labels YAML. And everywhere else, the kind design label is renamed to kind feature, and it is not an option in the majority of the repos. But how we go about reconciling to that ideal state is not something that the tool currently supports, and would require some sort of survey or mass communication where we get everybody's intent and then implement it. So one more human, manual, smudgy way we could do that is to actuate the changes as described. So every existing one of our 240 something repos will still have kind to design as a label. And then a human will be responsible for sweeping through all of them and deleting it from the repos that don't currently use it, and then contacting the subproject owners for all of the repos that do have issues that use it, and figuring out what they want to do with the label. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So on the original issue that was opened in K community, so there was a phase of feedback that existed in terms of asking subproject owners whether, like, who actually uses kind design in their subprojects. So three of them came forward. So if I recall correctly, controller runtime, cluster API, and kubeadm. But I suspect that we would have to either like post in KDev mailing list asking for feedback about this, or once the change is merged, then just like put out a notification either on, if not kubernetes.dev, then Kubernetes contributors on Slack. And then if folks don't come forward, then that would be an assumption. I don't know if it's safe to make the assumption that they are okay with that delta existing, and if we should actually like go ahead and like a GitHub admin should go and like delete it manually on that subproject. So
The original intent was at least to pretty much remove it from KK, because all the design issues, like people aren't using that label anymore, and it's and the ones that do get tagged with it essentially fall through the cracks of triage, since all of it has shifted over to KEPs for designs.
There's some other way more. The correct way of doing this would be to allow per repo exclusion of the default set of labels. But that would require some technical changes, which may or may not be gnarly. I don't know. And I think it also gets into the question of whether we are okay with having some repos exclude themselves from the general set of org-wide labels.
Well, and I think that's where the original intent, we wanted to steer away from that. We wanted to have like, hey, here's the default set of labels that you can expect to be everywhere. And then we can add if there's repo specific stuff, but we wanted to avoid that in general. And I think I still feel that way, but if like I think the kind of process that you originally mentioned there, Aaron, I think that's the one that makes the most sense to me as far as like remove, like we can remove from the default set kind design. We can add it where we know we explicitly need it. So where subproject owners have called it out. We can, with the API, it's easy to kind of sweep through and delete it based on, hey, is there any issue? Is there any open issues or PRs that are using the label? If no, delete the label from the repo. But then it will be that languishing little bit of like tracking down, like, okay, so if you are using the label, do you still need it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw out one other technically correct thing, which is we don't have labels.yaml is not fully reconciled with the state of the world. That's what's partially allowing us to get into this mess where like not all labels that each individual repo has live inside of labels.yaml, nor does labels.yaml and the tooling that consumes it go delete anything that's not in labels.yaml. And we could also try and solve that problem. So we do have one source of truth, and then it's pretty easy to reconcile the world to that. But I know, there's been work ongoing for this for a while. So I would rather do the pragmatic thing to move this forward, but maybe open up some issues to talk about those other more technically correct solutions. And I think a notification out to KDev that, hey, this is happening is a good first step, with a deadline for, hey, if we don't hear from you by such and such a date, we're going to remove it from your repo. And I think scripting and tooling to get the list of repos that would be impacted by this would make that a more informative email for certain subproject owners. Like people, I don't know. My experience is if an email is longer than 3 sentences or doesn't have a bulleted list, people aren't really going to read it or notice that it affects them. So I think finding a way to name the repos that are impacted by this would be helpful.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'll do is I will take a few days. I'll draft out an email. I'll reach out to like I'll post it up on ContribEx, or I'll reach out to the GitHub management channel, and we'll send out a notification. And with maybe like a week's is a week appropriate, or in this case a longer period is needed?
I think a week for the notification period is fine.
Okay.
Because the intent of what we're going to do, we're going to remove it from the default set. We've added, I'm looking at the PR, we've added it specifically to the repos that we know need it. We can also do a delete, like we can add it to Kubernetes with a delete after. So that it is explicitly deleted when this merge from Kubernetes.
Okay.
And then it's just reconciling against the rest of the repos, doing the scripting to figure out like where is it still being used, and what do they want to do with it.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks for raising this, by the way. I know this has been super gnarly, and I didn't mean to throw a wrench in the works or anything. I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page about what exactly the implications are of this. So super appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Madhav. Bob, you have last on the agenda for today.
Easy CLA. The thing that
is it easy?
Supposedly, how do we want to move forward with this at this point? Christoph, I know you wanted to take a look at it.
Yeah, my biggest issue with it is like the lack of customization around the message and the wording and that kind of stuff. I don't know how big a deal that is, but that is like the one kind of like lingering reservation that I have about it.
For me, like I am honestly less concerned about the wording being in the picture, because honestly, the CLA stuff is not Kubernetes. It's out of our hands. Like anything that gets them and like reaching out to the CNCF to work through these issues instead of like coming to us about various little like CLA problems and then us literally just telling them to talk to the CNCF, I think is a good thing. And then the fact that it also explicitly lists which commit is the problem is also like super handy. Like we have routinely run into this problem in docs when trying to like update the next release branch. And it just becomes like a fun hunting game to find which commit is bad.
Mm-hmm.
But so refresh my memory, is there, I think like the ideal thing I was asking for, and there was maybe a PR about rolling out a change to the CLA plugin to listen to one of the two contexts. Like I was really hoping we could keep our existing CLA check. We could turn on the new CLA check, but non-blocking. And then I would expect it would be the CNCF's responsibility to generate a report that scrapes all of the PRs to see where do these two checks differ. And if after a while we see that they don't differ at all, they're both correctly, rejecting or accepting commits the same way, then we'd be happy to flip over.
The one problem is like right now it's just batch updates to the easy CLA system, from the old CLA to the new CLA. So it's like if you've signed the old CLA recently, and easy CLA is on, you might get a warning saying that like, hey, you haven't signed it because they haven't done their batch update yet.
Is it possible for, so let me ask that, like, is the whole, like, one of them is blocking, one of them is non-blocking, is that technically possible? Because I
Right.
was led to believe maybe it wasn't.
Yeah, right now it looks like it's not possible because what winds up happening is it still shows up as a negative check on the GitHub status, which is then blocked from merging unless they exist in both systems and pass both.
But the check is not listed as a required check. Is that correct? Like, it shows up as a red X, but
Yeah,
it doesn't necessarily prevent merge.
That one, I did just see it like block merge on a couple things in KORG. I'm not sure. Like I didn't dive deep into that. I just remember seeing it. It is not touching any of the easy or any of the branch protection rules or anything like that, but it is at least throwing a, bad check.
Well, that's still my ideal. The alternative sounds like we just flip it and we go along for the bumpy ride. And if that is our only recourse, then we should do so while being mindful of deadlines that might cause a flurry of people to open a flurry of PRs, like enhancements freeze.
Yeah.
So I would probably not do it immediately before enhancements freeze, and I would probably not do it too far before code freeze or soft code freeze or whatever the next deadline is.
Yeah.
Um,
our original windows were trying to be like in cognizant, like recognizing all those various deadlines. We definitely wouldn't just do it again. Like, yeah.
Still not super thrilled with the idea that we can't run them in parallel, though. Like, this is the process we go through to add any new blocking signal to any of our repos, is open up something that can run against every PR, but it blocks or it doesn't block.
Well, isn't that already what's happening in KORG, or did I miss something?
It sounded to me like Bob was saying he's not 100% certain, but it appeared as though it went straight to blocking.
Yeah, even though like the rule, the branch protection or whatever rules are set up so that way it's not a required check. There's an easy way we can test this, and that's just create a new account and open a dummy PR with the CLA signed in like the old CLA system, but not in the new one.
Well, and there's definitely.
Let me see if I can
I'm
find.
not going to say definitely. There's, I remember correctly, there's a way to tell Proud to ignore a particular context.
Yeah, you can skip it. I just think it's unfair to our community to suddenly force a bunch of people who have admin access to a repo to have to manually skip or override a specific context.
Well, and the thing is, like, if we have a certain level of confidence from the Linux Foundation that like it's mostly working, we can try try flip and see how many people complain. As long as we like do a sync very shortly before we do the flip.
Yeah. They will coordinate with us on any time frame to do async. And we did go through the list of about 50 contributors that were active that did not exist in the new system that should theoretically be reconciled already. Like, they gave me a list of, I think, like 200 people that didn't exist in the new system and their GitHub ID, and basically found who was active and just had like tracked down and sync their LFIDs.
So if I look at the count, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I feel like the next steps here are, let's get certainty on whether enabling it non-blocking is possible. That can help us make a more informed decision about how to roll out. And then if we have to do a disruptive rollout, I think we choose a higher traffic repo, but not Kubernetes, gain more confidence that it's working. And then we can flip over for everything. But I'd like to see that documented in a step-by-step plan that we get to sign off on and we get to hold the CNCF accountable to. I want to be very clear and explicit about the step-by-step instructions that must be followed.
I'm wondering if that, like, I know we're over time, but I'm wondering if we need to be that prescriptive. If we, we're definitely not going to do it before enhancements freeze, which is a week from now. Code freeze is November 16th. So if we did this in a timeline of like October 1st is going to be the cutover date, and we cut over, and if there's a problem, we have a rollback plan, but we just cut over everything all at once. What's the worst case scenario?
We end up with a bunch of PRs that have a blocking check that somebody will have to sweep through and manually fix if we revert back to the previous system. So we'll have to make sure we've got a script or something that is able to mass comment on PRs that are found by a specific context failing.
I think we still have the migrator, the status context migrator script that can be run by one of us. I'm pretty sure both of us have run it before, Aaron, where it basically uses our credentials to just mass. It doesn't skip the context in the same way like placing a comment. It literally goes in and does an API call and says, like, puts your picture next to the context and says, this context is green.
Yeah, you're correct. I
But
still just feel like it'd be cool to open it up against a repo that's like higher traffic, higher contributor base to give us a better impression in Kubernetes org before we flip it everywhere. And I think it is in
against KK directly.
Sure. I mean, I guess I was thinking more Kubernetes community, but yeah, we could turn it on the one repo that's going to make the most noise the quickest and impact the most people.
That's it. We could also go with the second busiest one, and that'd be K website.
Yeah. Because then at least we would have, if we did it against one of the super high traffic ones, like the thing is community, yes, it's higher traffic, but it's higher traffic from like the regulars who are likely already going to have a CLA signed. Yeah, it's the outliers that I'm more concerned about.
Yeah, anyway, I just like, I think it is worth our while to be very clear and explicit and documented about what our expectations are, so we can provide clear and actionable feedback to the CNCF in the event that our expectations are not met.
Completely and totally agree. And so that we can be on the other side clear with our contributor base about like what's going to happen and when can you expect and who do you contact, and if you have a problem, what your turnaround time is going to be. Like, even if we block merges for a day, worst case scenario, and everything's on fire, like we know that people are going to be responsive on both the easy CLA side, the general LF side, and from our GitHub management team side.
Thank you for that much more positive outlook on why we might do that.
Okay, so we are over time. Is there anything else that we want to talk about right now about this or anything else?
I don't want it. There's no way we can drive it to consensus, but I just want to throw out there another potentially large disruptive thing would be pushing forward on renaming branches from master to main. I haven't had the time to like sit down and think through the process. I feel like the main blocker is for us to figure out how to most effectively delegate and measure completion of this. I think that all of the technical blockers are basically gone. It's mostly the social blockers and some of the tricky, tangled, hard-coded things for our scarier repos like Kubernetes, which I'm almost at the point where I would say no to Kubernetes renaming its branch, but maybe everybody else would disagree with me on that. But I would love to see more progress on it than we have. It's somewhere, it's like 20 something repos, maybe slightly less than that have migrated. And we're totally at the point where we could blast out a call to action. The only reason I've held off on doing that is because I feel like tying together a tracking issue to the repo in question, I've not been able to do that. We could like mass create tracking issues against all the repos and say, okay, go. But I think we can talk about this asynchronously. I just want to plant the seed for the people who are here that like, it would be cool to get that done.
Yeah. It's been on my mind too, but it's always just been the fifth thing on the list.
Just below the line.
Yeah, so it's like the other thing.
Okay. Well, I'll call it there. For these and everything else, we'll follow up in the GitHub management public channel on the Kubernetes Slack. Thank you everybody for attending. We will see you next month. Cheers.
Thank
See
you.
ya.